Hello, everybody. You have tuned in to Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover virtually any aspect of making a murderer. I go over the evidence, the documents, the photos. So if you like, stay tuned, and in the future I'll have many more videos besides the one you're about to see. Hey there, everybody. How you doing? Okay, I'm doing this a couple uploads here tonight, and why I'm doing these and why I'm putting these up right now is because I'm going to be revisiting this case somewhat over the next month. I'm going to be putting together some things about this case, stuff that isn't covered in these videos that I think folks might find interesting. It's a case in Wisconsin, Neenah, Wisconsin. It's the Michael Funk case. He was the owner of Eagle Nation Cycles. He was unfortunately killed in a hostage standoff, but by the good guys, by the police and everything. It's a huge mess. It's a ridiculous, mess in a lot of ways, particularly because of the officer who did the shooting is just beyond to me. He would seem to have zero regard for the taking of human life. He would just seem to have zero regard. Zero. Anyway, so this is gonna be, parts 1, 2, and 3. Whichever one this is gonna be. This is gonna be at the beginning of each one of them, so that people know what they are. So these are parts 1, 2, and 3. I'm uploading tonight for people to go ahead and get the backstory of what I've already covered before we move on into what I'm going to have coming for you. So that's why we're doing this, uploading it as a premiere as well, so that people can have a discussion while they air for the first time. So here we go. This is the case of Eagle Nation Cycles, Michael Funk, and an unfortunate situation, to be sure. Hello, everybody. Back today to talk about another case in Wisconsin that came to my attention that I think gives me an opportunity to show where police are pretty much justified in shooting and in the way a stressful and adrenaline filled situation that a standoff or a hostage situation can be. I think I'm going to go ahead here today and show what's acceptable, what would be acceptable, and where things can cross the line. I think this case kind of very well illustrates that. So, what this is it's about a motorcycle shop called Eagle Nation Cycles in Neenah, in Wisconsin. Okay, the police were called out because there was a hostage situation. A gentleman by the name of Fladoff was holding the owner of Eagle Nation Cycles, who is Michael Funk. Okay, there's the name that I was referring to. And then there was two other hostages that this suspect, Mr. Fladoff, was holding in the Eagle Nation Cycles business. The cops, responded and everything, and they get there, and what you see, and I'm going to show you the video here today. What you see is a video of after the cops arrive, and from what I've read in the article, which I will be posting below for all of you that want to go read it yourself and look at it. But what it says in the article is that they attempted to enter the business when they first got there. The police officers did, and they were met with gunfire, and so they kind of pulled back and were trying to tactically trying to gather themselves and figure out what they were going to do. And at that point, Mr. Funk came out of like the back door of the business. He stumbled and fell to the ground, and then kind of scurried up real quick and ran behind a little truck or whatever because somebody was shooting at him. There was shots coming out of the building there, and he gets behind this like truck thing or whatever, and he looks at the door, I guess, trying to make sure that the hostage taker wasn't coming out right away and once he saw that he wasn't in the doorway, he turns to like run away and get away from, the whole thing. And as he's turning to run away, unfortunately, the cop that was standing right behind him shoots him. Now, it's perfectly understandable in this situation that this officer shot Mr. Funk. It's an accident, but it's an understandable accident. Okay, it truly is, and I know for some people that's hard to believe, but it really, when you think about it, the stressful situation that a standoff with guns and hostages and everything, how stressful and the way the adrenaline gets going, and the fact of the matter is that Mr. Funk had his gun. He when he was leaving the building or whatever, he had his gun and he had it in his hand. Obviously to use for self-protection against Mr. Fladoff, but the officers didn't know that. So the officer just saw a glint of steel or silver in Mr. Funk's hand that looked very much like a gun, and he was very certain that it looked like a gun. So sorry. So that explains why the officer he was heightened, his sense of apprehension was heightened because he saw a gun in this gentleman's hand, but he didn't know who he was, and all he knew is that the guy had a gun and he was turning. Okay, so it's understandable that mistake that he could fire a shot or two and make at somebody, and then end up finding out it's a mistake that was actually one of the hostages. That is something that is unfortunate, but it's kind of part of the situation. That's what's so hard about hostage situations and gunmen, is that they're unpredictable, and that's me being fair and honest. Okay, the fact that this cop reacted to the situation the way he did initially, I have no problem with. When I say I have no problem with it, I mean that I can see I can see why it happened. I can see how it happened, and I can honestly say, okay, you know what? He didn't mean to. He didn't really mean to. It was an accident in a very stressful situation. Okay, I can understand it, I guess is the better word for it. But the thing I can't understand in this, and it's the thing that got me asking more questions, is that they ended up putting 19 shots into Mr. Funk. Yeah. 19. And people, when you watch this video I'm about to show you, Mr. Funk goes limp. After like the first 2 shots, he's limp. You can see he's just dead weight falling to the ground. Limp. And they continued to shoot him. So, that makes me go, whoa. Wait a second. Why are you firing 19 shots into him? Especially when you already, and you'll see in the video, especially when there were shots coming through the back door. So you knew there was a gunman inside that place. Can you imagine if that gunman had come out at the point when you were too busy filling Mr. Funk full of lead and would have capped you while you were busy overkilling Mr. Funk? Can you imagine the irony if that had happened? I don't know why 19 shots were fired. I don't get that. And that got me asking other questions. Because the cop was literally, like you can see in the video, the cop is kind of like maybe only 10 or 15 feet behind Mr. Funk when Mr. Funk is crouched behind like this truck or something, looking at the back door, terrified. Okay. And the cop could have said, "Don't move," or something, and given Mr. Funk the chance to just not move. If he, Mr. Funk had no idea that when he turned around, that there was that he was gonna be running, that there was a cop right there. He was just trying to get away from the gunman who was shooting at him. And you'll see in this video, like I said, after the first one or two shots, Mr. Funk goes limp, and I mean he hits the floor like a sack of potatoes.
Shots fired, he's okay. 4 shots fired. In the alley, one sound. Shots fired in the alley, 1 sound.
Do you have him under observation? Because we are west of your location.
Shots fired, he's okay. 4 shots fired. In the alley, one sound. Shots fired in the alley, 1 sound.
Do you have him under observation? Because we are west of your location.
So you see what I'm talking about right there. I mean, pretty much the first shot or two, you see that his body, he just goes boom. He just goes down face first. I mean, if they didn't make any headshots, I'll bet you anything that when they collected his body, that he probably had some contusions on his face, because he seriously goes down like a sack of potatoes after the first or second shot. The only reason that that you see any kind of movement from him on the ground is because repeated gunshots are being fired into his body. The body is going to move every time one is fired. So we're going to hear right now, this is going to be from the article, and you're going to see right now some of the testimony from the deposition given by Officer Hoffer, who was the one that was right behind Mr. Funk, the one that was closest to him. And you're going to also see some from the deposition of Officer Ross, who was the one with the rifle, who I believe was back behind the camera that we were watching that from. So, initially, Hoffer fired 2 shots. When Ross heard that, he fired a shot. And then Hoffer just kept firing. Hoffer almost had no bullets left for the gunman that was in the building firing shots. But eventually stopped. Maybe that was why. Maybe he was like, oh shoot, maybe I better leave 5 in the clip. There's another guy in there shooting. Anyway, I don't know, but the thing is that, yeah, and then it goes on to say that after the shooting kind of stopped, there was a brief pause where Hoffer had stopped shooting and Ross wasn't firing his rifle, and then after a brief pause, Ross fired 2 more shots. Because he said he thought he saw Mr. Funk moving or trying to get up or something. He says I don't know. It sounds like complete BS, to be perfectly honest. There's no way that after 17 shots that he was a threat to anybody in any way. The only thing that firing the extra shots, there's so many, I mean, this ridiculous amount is to my mind, to ensure the kill. To make sure he dies. I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, especially after the pause and then 2 more. I mean, you've already fired 17 into him. I mean, that's just bizarre. That's just really bizarre. And then add to the fact that he isn't even the guy. He isn't even the guy that you're there to apprehend, the dangerous one. He was actually one of the hostages. So, we're going to move into some of the article here, and was coming. Hoffer, though, said he saw a silver gun in Funk's hand, as clear as day. He said he shot at Funk as Funk began to turn toward him. Officer Robert Ross followed Hoffer's lead in shooting Funk without warning. I know action beats reaction, Hoffer said in a deposition that is part of the federal court record in a wrongful death lawsuit brought by Funk's widow, Teresa Mason Funk, against the officers and the city of Neenah. And if I let him get all the way around and start shooting before I shoot, I'm putting all the lives of myself and all the other officers around me in danger. So I chose to start to fire at him while he was about 90 degrees to me. So I don't understand why he didn't say something like freeze or drop that or something while Mr. Funk's back was still to him, to give Mr. Funk the opportunity to drop the weapon. What if Mr. Funk had dropped the weapon? Now, if he had done that and then Mr. Funk turned with the weapon in his hand, what then? So this is from Mr. Ross. In his deposition, Ross said that while he was looking through the scope of his rifle at Funk, he heard gunfire. He assumed the gunfire came from Funk. I've learned since that it was actually Officer Hoffner's first shot, Ross said. Ross shot immediately thereafter, and Funk fell face down in the alley. Hoffer and Ross fired 19 shots at Funk. The last 2 shots came from Ross after a brief pause. It seemed like he was trying to get up, Ross said. I don't know if that was the case, in retrospect, but he appeared to continue to move at that point. So moving is cause for shooting now. Okay. And you shot, asked Howard Schoenfeld, one of the attorneys for Mason Funk. And I perceived a continued threat, so I shot to stop the threat, Ross said. A threat. Shot 17 times and he's a threat. Right. So, I mean, I seriously am asking myself here why. You know, why didn't the officer say while Mr. Funk still had his back to him, you know, why didn't he say like drop it or freeze or something like that? That would have immediately tipped Mr. Funk off that the police were right there. And he could have immediately dropped that weapon in the dirt. I know if I was him and I was protecting my business, but I didn't know if the cops were there or not, and I was trying to escape, and suddenly had somebody say freeze, I would go, oh, the cops. I would drop that weapon right into the dirt and let them see that it got dropped. Mr. Funk didn't get that opportunity, and the officers say it's because it was a tactical situation, that it wasn't tactically appropriate for them to try to talk to Mr. Funk at all. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. There's obviously standard operating procedures when it comes to hostage situations. I always thought that creating a dialogue with at least the perceived hostage taker was kind of a priority, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure, obviously, because I haven't studied hostage negotiations in Wisconsin, but the point is that when it comes down to it, 19 shots was a lot. It was a great deal more than was needed. And so that leads me to this next bit. Because when I originally was reading this article and I found out they shot him 19 times, I was like, oh, holy crap, what the hell? That's crazy. Why is that? But it gets worse. Some of you, and this same thing happened in the Philando Castile case, and some of you may have seen my video about Philando Castile. I'll leave it in the information here below the video, a link to it. But it was the same thing there. The cop unlawfully, basically, or unrightfully shot a man, and the police, instead of upon realizing their mistake and all these things, did not call emergency vehicles right away. They let him bleed for pretty much 30 minutes. It almost seems like these departments and these police departments and stuff have like an SOP if they accidentally shoot somebody. Okay, always wait 30 minutes before you call an ambulance. Hopefully they'll just die and that problem will just take care of itself. Almost like, and then because 30 minutes is like acceptable to them. I don't know. It's weird how it ended up being 30 minutes in both of these. It's really strange. But what we're going to move into now is how long it took the Neenah police officers to get aid for Mr. Funk. And it also tells us in this next bit how long after, basically how many minutes after they shot Mr. Funk, how many minutes afterward they realized that he was the business owner and that they had just killed one of the hostages. We're going to see how long, and then after finding that out, how long it took them to get aid for Mr. Funk, to call for aid. Yeah. So check this out. So medical attention for Mr. Funk. Mason Funk's lawsuit says that after her husband was shot, Neenah police didn't tend to him for 30 minutes, even though they learned within 4 minutes of the shooting that he wasn't the hostage taker. They learned that within 4 minutes of shooting him that he wasn't the hostage taker, but it took them 30 minutes to bother with him after shooting him 19 times. The defendant's motion says, and that's the police department, the delay was reasonable because the officers viewed a weapon in or near Mr. Funk's hand and they had no way of knowing if Mr. Funk was awaiting an opportunity to attack them. Nobody secured him after shooting him 19 times. You didn't go and make sure and kick that gun away or put it in the evidence or something. Okay, fine. The motion also says there is no evidence that the delay caused Funk's death. What? Elementary medical, first aid. Elementary first aid tells us that bleeding, if not stopped, is very bad, and it will cause a person to bleed out, especially after being shot 19 times. So to in any way suggest letting a person who had been shot that many times bleed for 30 minutes before bothering to try to dress their wounds or try to hopefully help them survive, I mean, to claim that claim right there tells you, I mean, it just kind of unbelievable. Elementary first aid, people. Elementary first aid tells us that's complete crap. Hoffer said in his deposition that the scene hadn't been secured and that he wasn't about to put officers in harm's way to retrieve a suspect who's lower than us on the priorities of life. In a tactical situation, priorities of life are hostages, innocent civilians, then police officers, then suspects, he said. So, if that's true, Mr. Hoffer, why after 4 minutes when you realized he went from the suspect to innocent / hostage, did you not make sure he got medical care? Why? Did you? I mean, explain that. Because you knew 4 minutes after you shot him. As I said, if it was just that they had shot him accidentally, Mr. Funk, that is. I mean, if it was just that they had shot Mr. Funk accidentally, then I probably wouldn't even be talking about this. Because upholding the law is a rough job. It's unpredictable, and it's dangerous, and those things, those kinds of mistakes can and will happen. They're unfortunate, but they can and will happen. But what I can't get on board with here, what I absolutely cannot get on board with, is the fact that they shot him 19 times. Or at least shot at him 19 times. I don't give a damn. If 10 out of 19 bullets hit him, he was in major bad shape. But to fire that many shots, I think was just without any warning. I mean, if they had said something, they would have given, like I said, they would have given Mr. Funk the chance to drop the weapon, because he would realize the cavalry was there. Instead, the cavalry rode over him. It's really, I mean, it's just sad. It's really sad. I mean, you feel bad for this guy, Mr. Funk. He was just trying to run his business, and some crazy showed up, waving around a gun, holding him and 2 other people hostage. And then, as he's desperately trying to get away, and the perp is firing at him, he gets run over by the cavalry. So, it is just sad, but it seems to me that there could have been a less tragic ending to this if the Neenah officers had, number one, not fired so many shots into him. 1 or 2 would have been sufficient. It would have incapacitated him, or at least would have had him on the ground and managed. Or at least instead of rapid firing like 10 or 12 shots, fire 2, see if he actually does start to get up. And because claiming that he was still moving, you were still firing. How's the body going to stop moving if you're firing bullets at it? I mean, see, the logic here is just, why so many shots is the huge question for me. Why so many shots? But then you add to that, why are you waiting so long when you found out 4 minutes after you shot him that he went from suspect to actual hostage / innocent? Did you not start getting him medical care, trying to get him to the hospital, trying to get so he could live? Because obviously it was a mistake. But that's not what happened. The fact that he wasn't that medical care was basically just not considered for him almost seems like they wanted him to die. I mean, I know that if I found out that I had made a mistake and shot somebody that I wasn't supposed to shoot, even though it was understandable, but if I had found out that I had shot somebody I wasn't supposed to shoot in that line of duty, I would have an issue. I would seriously have an issue with that, and I would want to make sure that person got medical help as quickly as possible, because oh my God, I made a mistake. We need to help that person. That's what a normal person would think, right? That's what a normal person who has, a healthy kind of, brain thinks. Because killing people is unpleasant. You're not supposed to like it. The people that like it get hunted down and thrown in cages. So that's what's disturbing about this particular case for me. Anyways, that's all I've got here for today. We'll see you guys again soon. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe.